Okay, I have 1 minute after, so we will go ahead and get started. A couple quick things, just housekeeping. If you have a question during any time of the presentation, feel free to either raise your hand using the WebEx feature or type it into the Q&A, and we'll get to those as we go along. So welcome, thanks for joining us today to talk about STRIDES overview of using that within GCP. We'll go through today just quick introductions of your panelists, talk about why you'd want to use Google Cloud for research, give you some details about the actual NIH STRIDES deal, talk about how you can leverage it, start using it, talk about some use cases, and we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. And again, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to interrupt and ask those, again, by raising your hand or typing them in. So today, you are joined by myself, Doug Burton. I'm a VP at Burwood Group. My title is VP of Strategic Offerings, and I like to say the most strategic of those is, of course, GCP. Joining me today are the esteemed guests from Google and NIH STRIDES. We'll just go across the screen here, so go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everyone. This is Marcus Forbes, Account Executive with Google Cloud, focused on higher education.
Thanks, Marcus. Alice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alice Kamens. I work alongside Marcus, and my role is, one part of my role is helping universities and researchers access the NIH STRIDES Initiative. So excited to talk more about that today.
And finally, Tom.
Hi, excuse me. I'm Tom Shaw, NIH STRIDES Senior Project Manager. I've been on the project since pretty much inception. The only person on the project longer is the program manager, Nick Weber. And I work with Google closely in helping researchers decide if STRIDES is for them.
Great, thank you very much. So as we get going, we want to just do a little quick survey here to get some information about who is joining us on the call, so we know what your role is, how much experience you have using GCP, whether you use Google Cloud today. So if you could scroll through and answer all these questions, that would be much appreciated, just so that we understand. So we're going to give you about a minute to answer those questions. There's only 4. It should only take less than that, but that would be great. So as you're doing that, we'll go through, ignore the next slide, which says polls closed. We'll let you know when it's there. So I real quick want to let Alice talk just about the offerings within Google. So Alice, you take a little pull on your earlobe when you want me to advance slides, or just verbal cue would be fine as well.
Great. Well, while folks are filling out their poll, I thought I'd get started here. So I wanted to start with a little bit of inspiration about some of the work that researchers around the world are doing with Google Cloud. We are seeing amazing breakthroughs of researchers using Google Cloud to do all kinds of things, like obtaining the first ever image of a black hole. For me, this is part of what inspires me and excites me about my job every day. So really excited to have folks here on the call with us who are doing this too. Either, I'm going to guess, and we'll see in a second from the poll, but who are researchers themselves using Google Cloud, or who want to use Google Cloud, or who are the folks at those institutions that enable that usage. So just wanted to start off with a little bit of inspiration. Go to the next slide. I wanted to highlight one thing here, which is the Google Cloud public data sets. Feel free to check these out after the call. These are a really awesome resource, and there are also a bunch of COVID-19 related data sets been added over the past year. If you yourself have a data set you would like to make a public data set, there's also a process for that. So you'll have our contact information at the end. If there's more you want to learn about this, please feel free to reach out. Essentially, I just wanted to highlight some of the work that we're doing, highlight some of the work that you all are doing with Google Cloud. There are tons more resources. If you go to cloud.google.com/edu/researchers, and I'll put that in the chat for you all, since I know this is a very research-focused group. So I just wanted to highlight sort of the work that Google does to support research, and I'd love to talk more about how we've partnered with the NIH to make that really accessible. Perfect. I think we can go ahead. So do we want to check the poll? Can we see our poll results? Do we know? Should I pause for that? Awesome.
Okay, I'm sharing it on the screen.
Perfect. So great. Okay, so it's clear that we've got a lot of folks who are researchers themselves or research computing staff or central IT staff. Very curious what the other folks are. If you want to share that in the chat, I'd love to learn more. We've got a bunch of folks who do have NIH funding already, and so this is super relevant for you. And if you don't, maybe that's because you're in central IT, but you probably have researchers at your institution who do have it. And we've got a good mix here of what you're currently using in terms of computing. And we've got a good mix in terms of experience. So that's really helpful. Thanks, everybody. It gives us a good understanding of the group to move forward with. So I want to start by giving the outline, what is NIH STRIDES? The first bullet here is just an explanation of what the acronym means, so you can kind of disregard that, but we wanted to tell you in case you're one of those people who gets burned up by the question, what does STRIDES actually stand for? That's your answer: science and technology, research infrastructure, etc. Now we'll move on. So what is NIH STRIDES? It's really a contracting vehicle. It's negotiated between Google and the NIH, and it provides discounted pricing on Google Cloud for any researcher with an NIH grant or an NIH contract, NIH funding of any kind. What that means is that if you have that funding already and your institution enrolls in this initiative, you'll immediately start getting a really deep discount on Google Cloud for your work. There's also access to amazing training to help researchers harness the power of the cloud. And we can share more about that for folks who enroll in the initiative, but essentially the NIH wants to help schools, researchers, folks who are accessing this initiative also get access to the training to learn how to do so. And then I always like to highlight, there's a really nice direct relationship with the NIH. We have Tom from the NIH on this call right now, and he's a great resource. There's tons of folks at the NIH who are happy to get on the phone with folks and explain things or give best practices. So I just think that's also a great asset of the program. We can move ahead. Some of the top benefits here, again, deep discounts on Google Cloud for NIH-funded researchers. There's access to public and controlled data. Some of these data sets you can see here, and then also this sort of fast time to insight. You don't need to download the data to process it. You can access it instantaneously. Go to the next slide. So this is the big question. Okay, great. I'm excited. I'm interested. NIH STRIDES sounds like it's for me. How do I get started? The answer is to work with Burwood in this case to enroll. Burwood and Doug can follow up with more information with everybody here, but essentially there's a short agreement that the institution signs to unlock this initiative for their school. And then Burwood will be your point of contact to help you use all of the resources and the benefits. So the other thing I want to call out here is the NIH STRIDES agreement. I don't want to get too deep into this for the researchers on the call who probably don't care about the contract side of things, but the central IT folks may. So just to say that it's a very easy process to add on the NIH STRIDES agreement to the Internet to Net Plus Google Cloud agreement. By signing both of those, you're unlocking a discount across all work at the university, and then that additional deeper discount on NIH funded work. So Doug can give more details there. I think that's my last slide.
Yep, awesome. Thank you very much, Alice. So we want to just talk about what it takes to start using this. So, in the poll we saw there was about almost half of you have an active grant, and then the question is whether you're using GCP today. The majority were a little or none. So this is really about letting you know how you can start leveraging GCP within your institution. So number one, Burwood's goal here is to make sure that people can leverage the cloud effectively. There's a lot that as an individual researcher that you might want to just get access to tools, but we also want to make sure that at institutional level, that it's not something that you're going to start using and then get in trouble for because there weren't controls around it, or at least answer the questions for the CISO at your school to say, yep, security concerns have been reviewed. So what we'd like to do is go through an onboarding process with the institution so that at least it's a sponsored activity. So if that hasn't already happened, this is something we'd like to talk with folks within Central IT to involve them in the process so it's not a surprise that some of the researchers are using GCP. So we think that's a better long-term investment. So we'll look at things like getting the governance in place, leveraging automation tools to make it easy to deploy things into GCP. And the cost management thing is something that we don't like to gloss over, because you can spend, especially if you're using GPUs, you can spend through your grant money pretty quickly. So we want to make sure that you understand what you're doing and have some controls in place to keep things on the rails. And I already mentioned security. So we like to go through all these things. This is the onboarding checklist. So this would be if we're starting from scratch and doing the full execution of onboarding with an institution. There's a following slide to this, so if this looks like too much, don't get too scared just yet. But assuming that we're working with the institution and saying we're making a strategic investment in Google to do the full enablement of the researchers, it's things like getting that billing account set up so that when you are spending in GCP, we can send invoices instead of aligning things to individual credit cards. There's a whole structure around putting the framework in place for permissions within GCP that are inherited from the org, folder, and project level setup. Obviously, in order to start using GCP, you have to be able to log into Google. So tying into the identity that sits within your institution, whether it be custom or whether you're using Google Cloud Identity. And a bunch of other things around networking, security, logging, monitoring that we have to just make sure are in place so that as you use GCP, again, it's auditable. If something goes bump in the night, you know how to really dig into it. So automation around that. If you have existing projects already, defining the methodology by which we import those into the managed structure within your school, and then making sure, and this last but certainly not least, the financial aspect of this, that we can do the reporting to make sure that you know where you're at in your spend, and you can set budgets and controls around that. So that's the full onboarding checklist. If you're a researcher who says, yes, I'm one of the 42% who have an active NIH grant, but my school doesn't currently do GCP, we have an offering that we can do for free for you that is we'll establish that NIH billing account for you, we'll help you set up a project, and then we'll help make sure that the reporting is in place so your spend is known, and we actually, on behalf of all our clients, send a consolidated report out to NIH so that everyone's aware of where you're at with the spending. I'm seeing some questions come in. I'm going to pause for a second there. My role as contact review manager, trying to send slides that's related person. Okay. Oh, that was just because Alice asked for that. So how about BAAs? Does Burwood Group sign these with the institution? So the answer is yes, we do. So we have BAAs, but this is one of those things where there's also a BAA possible with Google, and there are flow down terms. So you can sign it with whichever organization you feel comfortable in their flow down terms, or you can sign it with all of us. We're more than happy to sign those. At no time does Google or Burwood ever have access to your actual research data. The only thing we can see is what your usage totals are, so we can send invoices. I'm happy to have follow-up conversations with that. So with this pilot checklist, what it does is it gets you access to all the tools provided by Google to do your research and leverage the NIH funds that you have. But there is a little bit of a buyer beware part of this to say, we do want you to at least have the conversation, or we encourage you to have the conversation with your central IT group so that they understand how you're leveraging GCP, just so we can get that conversation started. And it's not a one-time use, it's something that you can continue to leverage. Okay. I'm going to pause there to see if any hands come up or any other questions come up about what onboarding is and how we get you using GCP. Okay, I'll keep an eye on those. So one of the things that we like to kind of brag about is we've built a custom billing dashboard for GCP, really to address one key, I'll call it a shortcoming. Hopefully I'm not offending my Google friends here. Within GCP is that the budgets that are available within GCP are set on a monthly spend basis. So in order to record to say, I have this much amount of money in a grant, there's no place in GCP for tracing the spend against that grant over a long running basis. So you have a year to spend it, for instance. If you want to use GCP to track it, you'd send a monthly budget and then see what you spent last month, subtract it from your balance, and say, this is my balance going forward, and I have to keep on doing that maintenance. Within our portal, we can set and do the management of grants and credits and PO budgets that you have, so that you can set that and watch your progress against the spend and always have situational awareness of where you're at in your spend. We have alerting tied to that for anyone who is the researcher, the PI, and then, as I said, we send summary reports, including weekly consumption reports to anyone who wants to subscribe to those reports. Marcus, I saw you come off mute momentarily. Anything you want to add there?
No, sir. I just wanted to say that this is a huge benefit to folks like yourselves who are in research or in IT, ITS specifically, because as Doug pointed out, one of the main challenges that a lot of our customers experience is really tracking the funds and putting boundaries, if you will, around how those funds are leveraged. So this tool has been a phenomenal added value for customers like yourselves.
Yeah, much appreciated. So one of the features of this, if you say, hey, I have $5,000 from NIH, and then after that I have $5,000 in other funds, we can swap to say, yep, you are eligible to use that NIH grant funding discount when you're using their money. And once you spend through that, then we can flip you over to the I2 account and take advantage of those price rates for that price book. So we can manage that so it's automated, so you know that, yep, we will automatically flip over. And if you say, once I run through that last $5,000, I don't have any more money, please suspend my account. We can configure that so that you have the controls in place so that there won't be cost overruns. We also have things like velocity alerts. So if you say, hey, if I ever spend more than $1,000 in a day, please flag it immediately so that I know that that's happening. Prevents cost overruns or surprises in those situations. Okay. Just some other benefits of working with Burwood. We talked about that simple consolidated billing. As your reseller, we also give you access to a technical account manager. So as there's someone who's getting started doing research and they say, I just want to talk to someone about the tools available that might help me do my research at Google, because we work with over 40 schools, we've had experience working with researchers and have some insights into how to best construct things, leverage tools, use things like preemptible machines to save you money as you go in, some experience with AI and ML, so we can help you with those things. Those are free consultations for an hour, per researcher type thing. If it turns into a project, obviously we can write up a statement of work, but we're here to help you get started on that. Our onboarding process we've used a number of times. We've had good success in getting people, that gets you to the starting line. But if you don't have the right shoes on to run the race, it's going to be painful. So we think we can get you set up to do that successfully. Talked about the consulting expertise as well, that if there is some assistance needed to help design some things and help build things, we can bring some resources to bear. And then finally, we've developed what we call our Buggy, our Burwood user group for Google Higher Ed. So there are other researchers doing things like you're doing. There are other people who are struggling with GCP and how to leverage the tools effectively. So we create communities of practice around those things and can give you access to others who are doing the same or similar things with tools, so you can bounce ideas off, and it's just a way to create greater awareness around that. So those are things we hope make your lives easier as you start getting into this using the funding. So there's some sample things. So getting into the research use cases, so things where we've seen our customers really leverage Strides effectively. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can use Google Cloud for, but research is one of those areas. So I'll say today, the majority of clients that we have that are using Strides funding are doing it to conduct genomics research. So the Broad Institute has a tool called Terra.bio that it's a platform as a service. You log into Terra.bio and do your work there. And on the back end, it's GCP. So those are very simple ways when we talk about our quick onboarding. If that's what you're looking to do, is use a tool like that, all we have to do is set up the billing account for you, give you access to it, and we can instruct you how to create that tie within Terra.bio to host it within GCP. And suddenly you have access to the tools that they have, and as well the unlimited capacity that Google Cloud provides to you, so you can do the processing very quickly. So there are tools built on top of GCP, which is really nice, and then it has all the power to give you the unlimited potential of using BigQuery to do all your analysis, as well as other tool sets such as So I'm going to do this out of order here, but Jupyter Notebooks to really host your data science needs as you do your evaluations. Another great tool that can sit on top of Google to leverage and give insights and collaborate with your research peers as you're doing that. Other statement of the obvious here, Google is basically unlimited compute, right? You have on-prem research but it's either, there's two reasons why you want to leverage Google. One is for capacity and the other one is for capability. So if you want to have access to the latest and greatest GPUs, your on-prem research compute facility may not have all the latest and greatest. There are refresh cycles. Google is always on top of that, so you're going to get things sooner and have access to those resources. And again, just at scale. Marcus, you look like there's more you want to say to add to that.
No, I think you articulated that very well. You know, folks, a lot of the times you've got researchers that are waiting in queue for their needs, and unfortunately that delays the time to science. So having the flexibility of leveraging a hybrid environment or a multi-cloud environment is extremely beneficial in some of these key areas here. Lowering costs is a big deal, especially when budgets are being cut, enrollments are reducing due to the pandemic and other things. So it allows you to have that flexibility and reduce the cost in terms of managing the data center environment, where typically hardware is expensive. You know, heating, cooling, power, all of those things are an incurred cost with managing an HPC environment on-prem. You can reduce that and almost eliminate that expense by moving a lot of those workloads to the cloud. As Doug mentioned, you would gain access to the latest hardware without having to refresh, without having maintenance windows and downtime. And we manage that fully for you guys. The other great benefit too is around, you know, optimized scheduling, which is something Doug talked about before. No wait times, no sitting in queue, and overall reduced complexity. I think that is one of the bigger highlights is that we can manage that environment for you. You've got technical account managers from the Burwood team that are hand in hand with you in terms of administration to enable your success.
Yep. So lots of reasons, like the tool sets, the capacity, and the tools that Google gives you. So Jupyter Hub has great tools. There's also things like AI Hub, all the AI ML capabilities that exist within there. So access to things that you normally wouldn't have access to, tooling that allows you to get a jump start. And again, all we have to do is get you on the platform to give you access to all those tools within GCP. So our goal here today was to make sure you're at least aware of what the contract vehicle is, how you get started using the STRIDES agreement and using GCP. So with that, we're at the Q&A portion of the program. So if you do have any things that you'd like to talk through, please, again, feel free to add them into the chat, the QA, or hit the raise your hand button and we'll unmute you. And while we're waiting to see if anything comes in, Tom, is there anything else from the NIH perspective that you'd like to feature?
No, you guys have made me superfluous. I'm irrelevant. Thank you.
Okay. There's a request to get a billing of the demo platform. I'm more than happy to do the 5-minute demo of that, but I don't want to assume that that's where people are most interested. So I'm going to just pen to that one very shortly here, and we'll jump into that. I'll give it just a couple minutes here to see if there are any other questions that people would like to walk through.
I was also going to jump in to say, I know, Sherry, we had a question from you, or just a note from you, trying to understand NIH STRIDES is related to a potential purchase by your university. Let me know if we can give you any other contract details, and if not, I'll give our email addresses here for follow-up questions.
Okay, since no other questions are going to come in, I'm just going to go ahead and jump over and show our portal. Give me a second while I log. So basically when you go in, let me real quick change this to be my demo university. Okay, so within the portal, a couple of things that we aim to do. Again, it's provide visibility into what spend there is at both the individual user level as well as a collective for a group administrator. So when you use the NIH STRIDES billing accounts are price books within there. And Burwood's point of view on this is that we want to minimize the number of billing accounts that you roll out, because getting a full view of everything you have running is easier if you can go look in one place for it. So we worked with NIH to say that we will roll out a single master billing account for NIH STRIDES for use at your institution, and add projects into that billing account and control the spend by putting budgets for the individual project. So just as an example of one I know I have a budget set up for. So in this example, at Acme University, they have two budgets in place. One is a $5,000 paid usage, and then they have a future $2,000 credit. So this could be an example where there's a $5,000 NIH grant in place, which is actual money you'll use because it flows through in the back end, and then you're using those funds to pay. But that researcher could have also reached out to Google using the research credit program and received a $2,000 credit to support their research. And in this case, they did it in those two allowances in order. Say, first, we're going to spend that $5,000 from NIH using the STRIDES discount, and then we're going to move to using that credit, which would be on the I2 price book for that. So credits get deposited into different billing accounts. So again, it'd be flipping from this billing account to that one. The researcher would be a project user within this, and so they would have access to, when they click this drop down, any projects to which they were assigned, and they can see what their spend is. So they have that $5,000 budget, and they just recently started, so they're only $50 into it, and they can see their remaining budget. Within here, they can drag in and see, I want to understand where my spend is going. Any of these are downloadable and exportable to see where the spend is. So if they had seen a sudden spike in utilization from yesterday to today and want to know what caused that, I wasn't planning to see that, they can go down, log in here very quickly and see exactly what's driving their cost down to the entity level, which is that lowest SKU level detail within GCP. Okay, so then how all this works is within the project configurator, we have the area where you add your project. So let me go into the example here, and I apologize for the color coding of things. This is my demo data, but some of the rules we have in place to enforce things within the portal make it less than perfect demo environment. But within here, you can see that project you're looking at, you have your two different budgets. And then once they're done with this, they spend through the $5,000, we'll automatically flip them. So pretend this was the STRIDES account, it flipped them to the paid account or credit account. And then after consumption of those credits, you can either select to bill or to suspend. So in this one, we've chosen to suspend, to say they have the $7,000, and then we disable billing, which prevents any future spend. So with that, what you're allowed to do is we recommend the pricing goes down. So David, your question about managing multiple users with multiple lab accounts, the project is the level of granularity at which billing happens. So you set budgets for projects. So one of the common things we'll get questions about is someone will say, hey, we have multiple people sharing a project. How can I ensure this person only spends this much and this other person only spends this much? We recommend separate projects for those individuals. And what we can do is we have within our portal here, we have the ability to set these budgets at the project level, but we can also do it at the department level. So this is a reporting department, but we can also have budgeting departments. So the engineering department has a single $5,000 budget for all of the projects that are underneath that. And then the same thing applies. You can either decide to bill and do a pay as you go for that. And really you're just using this to be able to set alert thresholds. And I apologize that this isn't something I can set because it's currently showing up as red, as suspended, but you can report on set the percentage or the amount of spend per day. Let me see if there is anything that is showing as active now. Sorry, our demo environment changed. That's the risk of doing live demos. So it allows you to do it for any shared budgets across projects is really what that says. So what is the best practice to budget for GCP? Well, NIH honored this budget process. My estimate is 10K following this best practice. NIH grant me that cloud spend fund assuming the project is. Okay, so my understanding of this, and Tom, feel free to correct me, is that you are granted funds from NIH. And if you're going to use those for GCP, what we ask you to do is set a budget so you can report of what part of your NIH grant you're going to use for spend within GCP, and then we're letting you set the budget for that. The subdivision of how much you're using for cloud versus how much you're using for other is how I'm interpreting your question, but I don't know if there's anything other than that, Tom, to say, look, are they allowed to, if they have a $10,000 grant, is there any need to specify and control which part of that goes to cloud compute versus other spend for that research grant?
No, as far as I know, there isn't. They usually in their grant application, they lay out what they think they're going to spend and where the money is going to. But as far as I know, there isn't a requirement that, they say what they're spending for cloud or not. I would double check with your program officer or where you got the grant from to confirm.
Right. And somebody said, but how do I know what the right amount is to budget? So within GCP, there is something, if you just type on GCP pricing calculator, this is a way for you to figure out about how much you're going to spend within GCP. So this calculator, oh, here we go. So actually go to the pricing calculator.
Yeah. And the other good thing is too, folks, is that as Doug's looking it up and pulling that up for you so you can take a look and see what that's like, you can always reach out to us here at Google. We've got a dedicated account team or account teams plural that can help walk through what that project or research looks like. And then we can, walk through the steps and essentially provide you with a cost estimate and help you determine exactly what those costs are going to look like for the amount of research based on the utilization, consumption, storage requirements, et cetera. So those are all things that we can assist you with. I don't want you to feel like it's overwhelming in order to figure out what that's going to cost you. We'll take that burden off of you and provide you with a statement that you can use for your research.
Yeah. So this pricing calculator is something that you can use to say, hey, you can just give some approximates. And this is another thing that either Google can help you or Burwood can help you to take a guess at what you're going to use, but you just put in some basic things about what you're going to do and add it to the estimate, and you'll see that this configuration is about $73 per month, right? So you can add in any, this is an exhaustive pricing calculator to say this is all the things we expect, but it tends to be a good baseline for you to understand how much to budget for. Will NIH ask me to compare on-premise to cloud, or is that a question for program manager?
No, I don't think, well, I mean, again, your program manager can confirm, but I don't think there is a requirement for you to go into the cloud to do your work. The reason we've moved to, and reason STRIDES came about was we found a lot of the data being kind of siloed where people would go and download it and then try to do their work locally. And we're trying to flip that paradigm, leave the data where it is and bring the compute off-prem into the cloud for a variety of reasons. One is something we're addressing here that Doug, I believe, alluded to earlier in the presentation is when you set up an on-prem data center, those are sunk costs for X amount of time. And you won't have access to the newer CPUs, the newer machines, the newer compute, and you don't have, it's not unlimited, but I don't know if anybody could get to the limit of what Google has in their cloud space. So the idea is we encourage you to do it, but there is no requirement to do it.
Yeah, this comes up somewhat frequently in our conversations with clients is like there are acquisition processes for compute resources that is kind of the legacy way to say, hey, I want to go get some compute, and it was built to say, hey, you need to get at least 3 quotes for that physical hardware you're bringing into our data center. That's a conversation we're happy to have with your procurement folks to kind of walk through what the difference is, because a lot of times they'll say you need to have a quote to issue a purchase order, right? So we need to know how much you're going to spend, and it's a different model, right? You're getting access to a platform of compute that you can typically, if you want to spend a lot of money, you can. If you want to spend a little money, you can. We can help put the controls in place, but how much you spend is really up to the architecture and the amount of data and the processing that you're doing within that compute environment. So it's a different model. A lot of procurement folks aren't necessarily familiar with that, and we can help with conversations. It's not always the easiest thing. There's usually a few iterations if you're starting from a place where they're holding on that while we wait to see if any more questions come in, just a final thing. So we do provide a lot of insights within our tool. This is to show what the spend is on a per project basis, and we can invoice down to, we have several levels. So there's company, group, department, and project level invoices. So for you to gain or give visibility into a group function at a department level, you can put the structure of what you need to see to group those projects together to show what it is. And again, we have some some usage summaries that we download and send to NIH to give. Here is what all project spend against NIH grant is, so that you don't have to worry about doing that reporting. Somebody says, my community thinks cloud is 10 times more expensive. They don't have the time to optimize their pipelines for cloud. I'm looking for a strong reason to use Strides. Is there one? So I would argue there's several. And I would go back to this slide to say, to build out a data center. So we've done some work with a public case studies with Clemson, that they did a high performance compute study that they spun up to 2.2 million cores in the cloud to do some video analysis to support hurricane planning, to say how do they optimize traffic routing out of the ocean-bound states. That's just not something you could do with on-prem resources, or if you're going to try, you certainly couldn't get that to that scale if you're going to do the equivalent amount of video processing using on-prem resources. The amount of money you'd have to spend to design, order, install, configure, and then run your experiment would be, you say 10 times more expensive for cloud. I'd argue hundreds of times more expensive to do all that, to design a simple experiment. So when you're a researcher and you just want to do your science, having to worry about building out and configuring and being an infrastructure expert, I think is unfortunate. Google solves that for you. It allows you to get directly to science by having an avenue to unlimited resources optimized to do what your spend is. And that's where we can work with you to say we can help you design your experiment so you're only spending for the compute resources and the storage that you need, not buying for the lifespan of hardware to do the experiment you're trying to do. So I would argue it's much more cost effective for that reason and for a research case study. Marcus, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I double click on everything that you just shared there. I think a lot of times folks perceive it to be more expensive, but the reality is oftentimes it's less expensive when you consider the cost entailed to managing that environment, the cost entailed to ensuring those resources are up and running. Hardware in itself is expensive. I worked for a hardware company for many, many years, specializing in these types of things. And I'll tell you, the renewals on average are anywhere from 15 to 25% just to renew the hardware themselves, not talking about service and support contracts or any type of maintenance and other things that go into managing a data center environment. So having the flexibility to leverage the cloud in that manner, in this manner, is going to reduce cost overall for you and for your higher education institution. Not to mention, again, just double clicking on what Tom was sharing, the ability to share and to collaborate with other researchers is something that you just cannot do in the data center environment to the degree that you can within the context of the cloud. So a lot of benefits.
Yeah, it's about capability in addition to the cost things, and it's stuff that you just can't do otherwise.
I wanted to go back to a question that came in earlier. I think Somali asked, are Strides costs publicly accessible? If not, how do I share the Strides cost with my community? So the NIH prefers that we just share those with folks individually. So we'll follow up with you, Somali, and share with you the Strides discount table.
Great. And then a follow-up question, are there large NIH data sets, for example, genomics on cloud that can be accessed as part of Strides?
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. There are public data sets that are available specific to genomics. We have a vast array of data sets that are available to you. And we can certainly provide additional information about those public data sets following up this call.
Great, thank you. Okay. Last call for questions. Otherwise, we're going to start the thanks for attending spiel. And I'm not in a rush if you have any other questions. Okay, so if anyone does have any follow-up that you didn't want to talk to everyone on this, I'm more than happy to hang on here. So feel free to stay with us if you'd like. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. The recording will be made available, and we'll figure out how that's going to be sent out. I assume just a link to everyone who was signed up originally. So thank you, Alice. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Marcus. We look forward to hearing from everyone.